Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started here. Tonight we're going to talk a little bit about the Rock Cycle project. I just wanted to go over some of the objectives of the project, talk to you a little bit about what are the expectations of the project. I've had a few questions with regards to what are the overall expectations, what am I looking for. So I thought I would start off by just going over a little bit of the objectives, talk a little bit about the Rock Cycle, then talk a little bit about the breakdown of the project, and then go into a real short example of what one would be, or what I would consider one to be a really good project, so that you guys have an idea of, you know, what I'm looking for. So obviously, this section of the project, or this section of environmental science, really wants you to be able to explain the difference between rocks and minerals. Okay, being able to give examples of the categories of rocks, that being igneous, sedimentary, and metamorphics. Can you explain connections that occur between the type of rock and the environment in which it forms? Being able to describe the rock cycle, and then explain that rocks and minerals are natural resources, and describe in terms of depletion and time the mineral reserve that is available. So, with that said, this project is really a compilation of all of the objectives that your lesson goes over. So you can see you have a whole bunch of vocabulary. The lesson talks a lot about mineral characteristics, and then, of course, there are the questions that go through the lesson. So it's important here that you certainly click through these hyperlinks as you're going through this, first and foremost, and then more importantly, as we move along here, let's get this popped up here. Let's talk about the project. So basically, the point and the purpose of this project is for you to write essentially a creative story that shows your understanding of the rock cycle. Okay, so the goal here is to choose a type of rock and determine what might happen as if were to undergo geological changes. Okay, so you might give your rock a name and describe it as an adventure. So if you're really, really creative, which is one of the things I'm looking for, that's something you're going to want to do. Okay, so the goal of this is partly creativity, and the other part is your scientific knowledge based on what you've learned in the lesson. So you're going to have some components of the grade that I'm going to be looking for. But before we go that, you see down here it talks about what to include in each of the terms. So obviously, the three types of rocks, whether it be igneous, metamorphic, or sedimentary. And then, of course, the terminology from that lesson, you're going to want to include that in there. So I'm going to be looking for some of these terms in your story. Okay, so it says here that the story should be fun and creative, but it should also accurately describe the rock cycle. Now, the guidelines, okay, 450 words, plus or minus. If it's more than 450, I'm okay with that. If it's less than 450, I'm not going to say that I'm not going to accept it, but I am going to be more critical to look at what content you have in those less or in that story. So, if it's 400 words and it gets the point across, that's great. If it's 700 words and it gets the point across, that's great as well. But if it's like 100 words, then we're gonna have to have a conversation as to what did you include to make it a good story. Okay, so that the content is scientifically correct, it's creative and engaging, and it's written with a logical flow of ideas. So those are some of the guidelines. Okay, and just to reiterate that, creativity is going to be key. Number one. Okay, proper terminology. Okay, I want to make sure that you have proper terminology in this story. For example, magma versus lava, or intrusive versus extrusive. Okay, those are just some examples of terminology that you need to make sure that you're covering in the story, and that you can accurately explain the difference. Okay. again, making sure that you're accurate and thorough in your description of the processes and the condition that cause the change in the rock. Okay, so having a good physical description of everything kind of sets the stage, and then allows your creativity then from there to flow into the story. Okay, so here are some suggestions that I have. Okay, I would first suggest that you outline or create an outline, um, as to what your rock might undergo. Okay, and then once you have an outline, so if you, for example, if you choose igneous rocks, okay, some important points in this are that your rock starts as magma. Okay, and then from there, do you stay deep within a cool, or do you start to come to the surface? So those are some points. If you're a sedimentary rock, you're being broken down, but what are those processes called? If you're a metamorphic rock, what occurs for you to change into a metamorphic rock? For example, what factors are involved? Okay, what do you look like now? How are you different from the previous two rocks that we talked about? So, um, again, making sure that you can answer some basic questions, starting with an outline, starting of what you're looking for, and then you can throw your creative piece into that after you have all the facts. Okay, so what I would suggest, and an example of a story that I've gotten, a while back. Um, I'm going to read it. It's really, really short, so maybe this will give you an idea of what I'm looking for. It says, "Hi, I am Jim the Rock. I am one of many sedimentary rocks. I'm going to tell you some of the changes that go on in my life. It's called a rock cycle. So here my story goes. I was at school making a speech and I felt really nervous. I was under pressure and felt really warm. I did not feel myself. In fact, I wasn't myself. I had turned into a metamorphic rock. The school nurse sent me home and I nearly fainted. Although I didn't look like myself, I was kind of cute and I liked that. 1,000 years later, I felt really warm and felt like I was melting. Actually, I was. I had turned into magma and looked horrible. I thought nothing but a little makeup can't fix, but then that melted all over my face. Then, after that, a change happened. Believe it or not, I had another change. I was lying on the floor because I burnt my bed. I felt really cold. I didn't feel like I had 1,000-degree fever anymore. At this point, I was a hard igneous rock. After that, at school, I was being treated like I was dirt on the ground. Well, I kind of was. I had turned into sediments. After I recovered from that shock, I felt like someone was constantly pushing me. Guess what? I was back to a sedimentary rock. So, this is an example, a short one, but an example nonetheless, of the rock cycle. So, as you move from igneous to sedimentary to metamorphic and go through that cyclical nature, this story, the student who created this story, looked at the cycle from the perspective of a student in school. Other students have looked at it from the perspective of, the family, being in a family. Others have looked at it from the perspective of being a new car to a used car. So, however you want to portray the story, it's entirely your creative, ideas. As long as you can successfully describe to me how the rock cycle occurs using some creativity. So that's the rock cycle project. Um, if you have any questions with that, certainly come into the VO. And if you're still struggling, we can talk about it. We can work on some ideas. And if not, I look forward to reading some of your stories. I think it's a really cool and interesting project. And I'll be back next week. We'll talk about another type of project that we're going to be looking at as we go farther and farther into the environmental course. So again, if you need to reach out to me, let me know. I'm here. Friday I do have a flex day, so I will not be in the office, but I'm here the rest of the week. So look forward to seeing you guys.